Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break the corporate grind. I'm Nikhil, your host, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn your dreams into reality. Many people separate creativity and finance, but Janet Storms has built a career proving they work together. From the world of dance to federal budgeting, her journey is a lesson in blending structure with imagination. And in solopreneurship, that balance is vital. Here are a few key takeaways that stood out to me. Embrace continuous learning. I love how Janet lives the idea of continuous learning. She didn't just make one career shift. She's reinvented herself multiple times, retiring, going back to school, starting a dance company, and even launching her own business now. As solopreneurs, we need to be adaptable and embrace lifelong learning to stay ahead of the curve. You control the work, not the timing. One of the biggest challenges Janet faced was realizing that you don't control when the right opportunities come, only how you show up for them. This hit home for me because as solopreneurs, it's easy to feel discouraged when things don't take off immediately. But staying in the game and being consistent is how you bump into those opportunities. Your business will evolve. Let it. When Janet started in 2017, she had a very clear vision for her business. But as she tested ideas, experimented, and adapted to client needs, her business evolved into something different. We often resist change because we think it means we were wrong in the beginning. But business isn't about being right. It's about learning, adapting, and becoming more relevant. Creativity isn't a luxury. It's a business tool. Janet's work proves that creativity isn't just for artists. It's essential in business. Whether in strategic planning, budgeting, or decision making, bringing a creative mindset allows you to solve problems in new and different ways. Yet, I still see in so many industries, creativity is seen as a soft or unnecessary skill. But innovation doesn't happen without imagination. If you're feeling stuck between different parts of your identity, whether that's the creative versus the analytical or some other seeming contradiction, don't separate them. Find the way they complement each other because that unique combination is what makes your business special. This episode is packed with insights about risk, resilience, and the power of creative problem solving. If you're navigating uncertainty or wondering how to blend your strengths into a cohesive brand, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vaish, your host, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest is a former federal budget analyst and professional dancer who blends creativity with budgeting strategy, proving that even finances can have rhythm. Janet, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and it's wonderful to be here.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and I'm excited for our conversation because I'm going to dive right in. So you've had an absolutely fascinating career journey, Janet, from dance performances to federal budgets. And it's not every day you see such disparate worlds, if you like, right? So my first question is, could you talk a little bit about what drew you to each one of these seemingly very different worlds?
Sure. I started out as a dancer and taught dance, choreographed, performed for probably until my mid-30s. And from when I graduated from college until my mid-30s. And then realized that I probably needed to think about something else to do that would be more amenable to as my body got older and all of those things. So I decided to go back to grad school. And this is back when we still had hard copy college pamphlets and catalogs. And I read the University of Washington catalog from front to back. And I found a joint degree in public administration and international relations. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. I started off thinking I wanted to do cross-cultural exchanges with other countries. So I said, this is great. But as I went through school and then I graduated and went to Washington, D.C., I had this opportunity to try many different careers, really. I had a 2-year internship And budgeting is what captured my interest. And the reason it captured my interest was the merging of numbers and words. You have to draft justifications and explain budgets. You have to understand the numbers, but then you have to make it accessible to others who are not numbers people. Also, I figured out, didn't take very long, that the programs that got the money were the ones that got implemented. And
Right.
so I said, wow, this is really, it merged my sort of all of my interests. And my whole federal career was in the international relations area, international broadcasting, working on post Cold War. Really, I was in the 90s. So it was a fascinating time to be a part of international broadcasting and a changing mission. And then
Mm.
ultimately, I went to the Senate
Hmm.
and I was an appropriations staff member on the State Department appropriations. And there really got the opportunity to really see the broad programs for international cultural, foreign assistance, food, water. And so yeah, that's how I got to the budgeting side
That's
of.
amazing, and you're right, because a lot of people struggle with they have one side or the other, right? It's very hard to sort of marry those two things, and we always talk about, even in brand building, that data still needs a story, right? And I think
Mhm.
Stanford did a study a few years ago where they found that 63% of people recall stories and 5% recall data points. So it's like you need both, but
Yes.
it needs to be wrapped in a story, and like you said, the words need to bring it to life, right? So I
Yeah,
think that's
and
amazing.
yeah, and I'm also, I always liked math. I
Yeah.
love, because math, when everything ties out, it's very rewarding. But I told my staff, and I always believed the budgeting is more than the numbers in the Excel spreadsheet, than in the cells. Every one of those cells represents a story.
Right.
So how do we convey that? And then the other sort of the reverse of it was I started a dance company um, when I came to DC. So at the same time that I was starting my federal career, I started a dance company. And we established ourselves as a nonprofit organization. In order to get funding, you have to have sound numbers. Right. So I found it, to me, it was like this merging of two really diverse fields, but they really needed each other, for lack of a better way of describing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then I want to talk a little bit about now your next step, because you told me that you retired in 2016, only to come back in 2017 and launch an LLC, which you now call your third career. So what inspired you to take this leap into solopreneurship?
Yeah, actually, what encouraged me to retire was this interest of merging the federal budget process with creative thinking. I felt, seeing the budget process from the Hill, from an agency, I saw gaps. And I thought, I always used what I learned in my dance career in my federal career, lessons learned. So I went back to grad school and got a master's in creative studies, because I wanted sort of that um, confidence that what I had experienced personally is really based on sound science and research.
Yeah.
So I got my master's in that, and during, I went to grad school with the very specific purpose of the question: how do I improve the budget process through creativity? That's why I went. I stuck with that for the 2.5 years I was there. And that's what I researched, is the connection between creative thinking, creative problem solving, and the budget process, which I now have expanded to include strategic planning. because I don't believe you can do budget in isolation and have it be effective.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, a vision needs to accompany it. Yeah. Because how do you bring it to life? How do you get people on board and behind it, right? To
Yes.
actually implement it. And the other thing that which I love about you is that, everyone talks about continuous learning, but you've actually lived that, right? You've gone back to school, started a different career, gone back to school, started a new chapter, right?
Yes.
And I absolutely love that. And I want to also touch on the international relations part, right? So you had another fascinating experience where you spent time in Myanmar teaching strategic budget workshops, I believe it was.
Hmm.
That must have been an incredibly enriching experience. Can you talk a little bit about that and some
Yeah.
of your takeaways from such a
Yeah.
different cultural immersion?
Yeah. It was, I was there for about 3 or 4 weeks. And in that time, I presented workshops to local NGOs, large national NGOs. I even had an opportunity to work for a day with parliament members and their budget staffs. It was in that time frame. It was 2018 when I went. So I have never been somewhere where everybody saw the value of creativity, and they didn't limit it to arts. They had felt like their education system didn't allow for creative thinking. So this opportunity to look at how to apply it to a broad range of areas and be open to it was so exciting to me. I didn't have to explain to them why I thought creative thinking was applicable to budgeting. They said, show us, tell us how we can do this. And my workshops really were very practical and hands on. And the comment I got most often is they appreciated that I sort of took it away from the theoretical, because
Right.
what they normally come away with when they get a new introduction to a new model or whatever is, okay, what do we do with this? I took them step by step. And I have this passion for learning about other cultures, about international relations, and to have this opportunity to go there at a time when Myanmar was so optimistic and open. It's devastating for me to think about what has happened.
Yeah.
But during that period of time, I have never been with so many people that had this energy for moving forward. And that's what I think I took away from it. One, that my model was useful, whether
Yeah.
it was to a small neighborhood NGO or the parliament. They each took away something, which made me feel good, but also that I wasn't crazy, right? To think that these two very divergent areas have a meeting point. And it was really from that experience that I built my model, and I've used what I learned there to today. It was just an amazing, really, for me, very fulfilling experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about your workshops because I think you do some really interesting things. And it sounds like Myanmar was sort of the seed, if you like,
Yes.
for the development of the workshops that you do now.
Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you now. One thing I always find is that there is an expectation. The solopreneurship journey is a strange one, and there's no guide. There's no guidebook for it, right? There are lots of books on startups. There are lots of books on how to be a CEO. I haven't come across at least one about how to be a solopreneur. So, what expectations did you have about this solo journey, and how is the reality surprised or challenged you?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Um, I'm going to start with the surprise part of it, or what I had to accept.
Hmm.
I don't have control.
Right.
I have control over what my product is. I have control over the quality and energy I put into my workshops and trainings. my products. But what I don't have control over is how it is received and supported by potential customers. And there is an acceptance that you have to sort of have. It's so easy to say, oh my goodness, nobody's interested. I'm just going to throw this out. I'm not going to keep going. Luckily for me, I have a very good sort of base subcontracting relationship with a training company. And they give me the flexibility, they give me the support. It also gives me the experience of teaching with a wide range of people. So it gives me that opportunity to then go and explore these other areas. But you can't dictate the timing of that.
No.
And that's been, I think I knew it, but it's how do you accept that? And then not let it deter you from continuing. And as a solopreneur, when you're by yourself, you can really talk yourself down, I think. And so it's challenging finding ways to keep going. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely you did. You did. And you raised some interesting points too, because I mean, so it sounds like you've got a little bit of a side hustle, which sort of gives you an anchor,
Mm-hmm.
that gives you the ability to sort of the freedom to experiment, because you're very
Yeah.
right. It is really about experimentation, failure, adaptation, improvement, and that cycle just continues. And you have no control over how it'll hit or when it'll hit. Obviously, it's important to have an idea of who your audience is, which you do, but
Yes.
the right product takes time to sort of develop, right? And I think that's the thing that we have. And to me, that was also one of the differences. When you're in a corporation, you're selling a finite product, right? It's already defined. Whereas here, we're sort of developing the product
Yes.
as we
And
go along. Yeah.
yeah, I think what you just said really resonates with me, because what I thought I would be doing and how I would be doing it from 2017 to now is different, because
Yeah.
you realize, oh, it evolves. I think that's the best word for it. Your product, your thinking, your expertise evolves. And how do you keep your business up to speed as you evolve? That's to me, that's a real challenge. And I don't, I'm struggling with that still, but maybe that's the biggest surprise is I didn't just, I started 2017 with a really sort of, okay, this is what I want to do. You try it, doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to keep trying and it doesn't work. Now I'm here. Okay, how do I keep my business, my marketing up, my website, everything up to speed? Because that's a whole nother level of effort and energy. So yeah, I think you're right. Um, Allowing your business to evolve is important, but how do you, as that solopreneur, make sure that the business continues to reflect that evolution? Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, you're evolving, right? And you are the business. So I
Yes.
think people don't make that distinction often. Like when you go to Apple, you're selling an Apple product. It doesn't take on your identity. Whereas everything we do as solopreneurs is a part of us.
Yes. That's right. And
Yeah.
I think many solopreneurs, at least all that I've met, are so passionate. I mean, that's the reason we decided to go into whatever business we decided to go into. It's because we believe in it.
Yeah.
But you can't get tunnel vision either, because
No.
you have to have customers. So it's that give and take.
And that's where it takes time to perfect, right? I mean, because we don't have huge marketing budgets, we can't go and do like millions of dollars of A/B testing that an IBM or a Citigroup might be able to do. But you just sort of have to figure your way through it, and I don't know a better way to do that. There isn't
Yes.
like an easy answer. You sort of have to get in the trenches, roll up your sleeves, and keep trying. The key, although I will say, is to stay focused, because
Hmm.
sometimes people sort of jump at the next shiny object. Say they give something 5 minutes and say, "Oh, it didn't work. Now I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to go over here." That is not a good idea. But as long as you stay focused on your audience and keep evolving your product, like you said, you'll get there, I think.
Yeah, it's not that my mission or my focus has changed.
Yeah.
It's the how do I reach,
Mm-hmm.
and what products do I provide, and
Yes.
how do I connect the people? That's to me the part that has evolved. And so the products have changed a bit, but the basic mission hasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and that absolutely, and that is the journey, is staying on that path, but evolving and making tweaks as you learn, you adapt to better suit the need that you're fulfilling for your audience, right?
Yeah, I
As
like
you
that.
understand that. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And actually that's a nice segue into sort of personal and branding elements that we're going to talk about, right? So you've developed an interesting positioning, which is integrating creative thinking into traditionally rigid areas like budgeting, right? So to me, it's like bringing a splash of color to a black and white world. So again, and you might have touched on this a little bit, but what sparked your realization that these two worlds could actually enhance each other?
Yeah. So I guess I should go back to when I was in the federal government and I was still dancing and doing that. I found that problems that agencies had, it was difficult to figure out how to address them
Right.
in an effective way. It's like, oh, we did it this way before. We did it, so let's try that.
Mm-hmm.
Or others have said, we just need more money to keep doing what we're doing, and then it will solve itself. And my years on the appropriations committee showed that that's not necessarily true. More money isn't necessarily the answer. Also, we saw situations where an agency would get the money and they'd come back and say, oh, wait a minute, that actually wasn't the problem. We need money for this. And I saw that with nonprofits. And so creative thinking and creative problem solving provides a process where you think about what's our problem? And you don't jump to the first question. You have tools, creative thinking, creative problem solving tools that help to ensure you've actually identified the correct problem. The other issue that I saw is that agencies and nonprofits didn't always know what they needed money for or when they needed it. And that's sort of, and when you have a strategic plan, so many times they would get developed and then they would sit on a shelf. And then the budget process would come, and then they would quickly just sort of open up the strategic plan and try to find linkages. But
Right.
ultimately, the budget didn't actually get you where you needed to go. Creative problem solving and creative thinking, again, has tools that help people, organizations to do that. So my idea was, let me look at the strategic planning process and the budget process, see where these gaps are, and then identify the creative thinking tool or skill that is most useful in those areas. Because my other thing is, I don't want agencies or nonprofits to feel like they have to throw out their existing processes,
Right.
because that's very disruptive. It can take years. From a practical standpoint, I don't think that's useful. But if you can help an organization or an agency look at where their weaknesses are and then fill these in,
Yeah.
that's where I think that the creative thinking, creative problem solving can really be helpful in what are traditionally pretty firm structures, but they're just processes, right? Their budget process is a process. And I'll just mention one other thing about how I feel creative thinking really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Budget processes tend to be pretty closed.
Right.
There's efforts to
Yeah.
try to get more involved, but it tends to be the budget office, the CFO, maybe senior management. But there's a whole philosophy but in creative problem solving where you need to get your stakeholders together. And you need to get them together at the right times of the decision making. Too often, the stakeholders would be consulted once the agency has figured out stuff or the nonprofit has figured things out. So that's the other area that I focus on. When in the process that you have, should and what stakeholders should you bring at what times?
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. In fact, in strategy, one of the rules we always have is when a client came to us with a problem, the first thing we would do is redefine the problem. Because 9 times out of 10, the problem that they're focused on is not really the problem.
That's right.
They haven't scratched deeply enough, or like you said, they've sort of gotten into the hamster wheel of the problem, right? And
They
the other
want
thing
to get to the solution.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone wants to get to the solution, right? I mean, and that's the other thing. It's actually on my website. It's Einstein's quote, and I might misquote it, but he says, he'll spend 55 minutes thinking about the
Yes.
problem and 5 minutes on the solution.
Yes.
And that's
That's
the
so
secret
true.
to, yeah. And the other thing I love is also what you said is bringing in the right stakeholders, right? This is not about doing it by committee, but it's having the right voices that will be impacted, or have implicate the budget has implications for, to bring the inputs in at the right stages of the process,
Mhm.
right? To
Yeah,
illuminate the process.
yeah, and the other thing I love about creative problem solving is the decision makers are recognized. It is
Right.
not at all saying, "Oh, we're going to make a decision by committee." No, the decision maker, but you're clearly saying who is the decision makers. But everyone has an opportunity to have a voice at the table.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that it's just a different way at looking at decision making, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it leads to a better outcome. And also, like you said, the impact is greater in terms of what you want to achieve, right?
Mhm.
With that budget and with your strategic plan. And you're right, most strategic plans lie on a hard drive or a shelf these
Yes.
days, on a hard drive, collecting
Yeah, I
dust.
guess I'm
Everyone
old
does it,
school.
but it's true. Everyone does it. Nobody looks at it ever again. That's just the truth of every corporation I've ever worked in. And they spend so
Yes.
much time, so many man hours putting this together every year, and then nothing.
What does it drive? And to me, that's the ultimate uh, sort of disappointing part of strategic planning is the wasted energy, wasted hopes, wasted beliefs, all of those things of everyone who is involved in it. And then how do they not get skeptical the next time they're asked to commit if they didn't see any of what made it into the strategic plan actually drive the decision making? Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it.
true. It becomes a checkbox
Mhm.
that they do. So
Yeah.
going back, staying with branding now, what's been the most challenging part of branding yourself as a creative thinker and a budgeting expert, right? Because again, they're two very different worlds.
I struggled with that for quite a long time because I come from the budget world. I know the skepticism of, and especially the phrase creative budgeting, because that is sort of means that you're not basing the budget on sound thinking, facts, numbers, right? You're making it up. So, but I also didn't want to present myself as very just doing the budget the old way, and that's what I'm teaching. So it was how to do this. And it's such a little thing, but my logo is of a grid, 9 boxes, but they go off kilter. And I thought that, okay, we got the boxes, we recognize there's a grid, but we don't have to stay with the 9 boxes. We can go a little this way. Um, and so, yes, it's been a real struggle for me. And so I think I tend a little bit to the more conservative or professional aspect, not so much. I'll use colors very specifically, and to try to show that there is this energy and a new way of thinking about it. But I'm still not confident, not comfortable that if I just went out there full blazes, saying, I'm here to completely change the budget process with creativity. I feel like that is a step too far. What I would much rather do is talk about the problems. Are your decision makers not getting information they need? Are you not getting money you need? Asking them those ways and then saying, okay, if those are the problems, then here are some approaches. So trying to go into it in a slightly backdoor way, I guess. I sometimes, to be honest, I don't even say the word creativity in my workshops.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I might say creative problem solving, creative thinking,
Right.
because what's more important to me is to keep the workshop participants open-minded.
Yeah.
And my concern is if I just come out and say, oh, we're going to talk about creativity, as opposed to saying, okay, maybe you have some of these problems. Here are some tools that can help you. So it's sort of going about it in a slightly different way. I do have to say, that there is this, over the last 10, 15 years, a much broader recognition of the importance of innovation is actually a word that companies, agencies are more comfortable with. Innovation is the implementation, right, of the creative thoughts in a way.
Yeah.
So there is that open door, but they don't necessarily think about it. They want their employees to be creative or innovative, but they haven't really thought about what does that mean
Yeah.
in these more traditional fields. You have to have an openness to it in those fields as well.
Yeah, I agree, and it is a balancing act. I mean, I know I work, I've talked to coaches too who have similar problems with mindfulness and
Mm.
accountability, right? Because you need both, but a lot of the corporate world sees creativity and mindfulness as fluffy, so it becomes really hard for them. And I'm not sure when creativity became a bad word in the corporate world, because to me everything in humanity that has propelled us forward has come from creativity, and to your logo, from going outside the grid. If
Mhm.
we stuck within the grid, we would not be moving forward. So but
Yeah.
I hear you. It is, you have to sort of, and like you said, I think it's wise to sort of lean a little conservative, because once you bring them in, then you can sort of open them up.
Yeah. And, I have to say audiences are different. And
Yeah.
as a trainer, as someone who does presenting workshops, I try to really gauge where the audience is. And then I did what to me was a very fun presentation last year, and I called it Processes Matter. And talk about how if you want to be innovative and you want your organization to be creative, you have to be very deliberate in how you structure your processes, because you can stymie them, right? You can
True.
stymie that innovation or that creativity, or it doesn't just happen in large organizations and agencies. So the processes matter. So I almost sort of broaden it beyond, uh, just the budget process, because it can squelch the innovation or it can foster it. So,
Yeah, you're right. Too much of it can strangle it, and too little of it
mhm,
can derail it, right? So, man, I
yes.
agree. It's a balancing act.
Hmm.
So, you talked about your workshops, and there was something that struck me. I think you mentioned that you incorporate movement and improvisation into your workshops, which is pretty unique given the subject matter. So, what's been the most unexpected reaction you've gotten from a client, and
You
how did
know,
it reaffirm your approach?
well, you know what? I'll be very clear.
Yeah.
My movement improv, I do more with individual creativity. It's a whole sort of other part of my
Okay.
business.
Okay.
However, in Myanmar,
Yeah.
I had a group of very young 20-year-olds, and I'm talking about budget and the creative problem solving. And one of them just said, show us one of your improv exercises. And so we did. We just all stood up and I had them be bubbles for, a few minutes, and then we sat back down. So it actually did. The young people were just like, no, we cannot just sit here. We have to move. And the other thing, there's really great research about the connection of movement, even if it's just walking. Sometimes if you're stumped and you can't get something done, just walking,
Yeah.
just getting moving, you'll come back and be better. So I integrate the movement ideas and creativity in that way. It's not dance movement so much, it's just getting yourself going. But yeah, I did actually have this budget workshop where the workshop attendees all wanted to do movement improv, and they did. It was so great. It lifted the energy of the workshop by 100%.
See, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know why you don't incorporate improv into your budgeting and strategic planning workshops.
I think I should.
I
Yes.
absolutely. I took an improv class a couple of years ago and I was scared as hell before I got there. And then I had never enjoyed anything as much. And I really think we could, if you bring that into the corporate world, that'll sort of help inject creativity without sort of,
Yes.
pushing it down people's throats, because
Yeah,
improv
that's
just,
true. Yeah.
it makes you let your hair down, right? In a way that we don't do enough in boardrooms, I think.
And the whole creative thinking research shows that, you've got to access your mind.
Yeah.
And it's really, to me, the most interesting research is the type of movement you do can help you with the type of thinking you do. Are you brainstorming, thinking of new ideas, or are you trying to refine and identify the best one? Different movements actually support each of them. So, yeah, I think I will have to think about that.
Yeah, and I love the yes and concept, which I learned
Yes,
from my workshop too. I think that's another great tool in any sort of corporate environment. We don't
I
have that enough.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we don't have that enough. You're right.
No.
It's it's a no or a yes, but,
Yes.
and that shuts people down when you say yes, and it opens people's thinking up. So I agree. So,
Yeah,
okay,
and I
I'm going
think
to give that some thought.
leads to better outcomes, right? Because
Mhm.
you don't have to agree, but it forces you to listen and hear other points of view with a more open mind. I think, at least I
Mhm.
found that it's been much more helpful than before the workshop. So,
Yeah,
so
when I taught dance and we would do choreography, we did so much based on improv, and we used that yes and all the time. Someone would do a movement, you, you do it, and you'd add on to it, and then suddenly you're in a whole different place that you never even thought about. So I do see the value of yes and.
that's great. And I expect to get some credit when you
I
when
will.
you
I'll say thank you to Nicole.
So let me ask you. So this is one of the things actually a lot of solopreneurs struggle with, right? Their creative side and their professional identity, so to speak. And a lot of people I talk to sort of feel like they either need to be the suit or the let their hair down, but they struggle with balancing those two things. So what advice would you give to solopreneurs who feel they have to separate these two sides, because you've sort of blended them beautifully together?
You know, I whenever I teach and someone hears they're going to go to a budget or an appropriations workshop or a course, they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be dry, dry, dry. And I consciously try to make it interesting, energetic, sometimes funny, as appropriate. And I can't imagine having this, doing what I do, if I didn't allow that to come into, I wouldn't want to be doing it, I guess, is the best way to say it. If I was expected to teach just very dryly, I guess, for lack of a better word, I wouldn't be enjoying it. But I get so much energy from the students. and then you ask them questions, and it's just like, oh, and you see the light bulbs go off. So I say you have to figure out what the right balance is, but I don't believe you should separate them. I think that they're stronger when you're able to figure out a way to integrate the creative side and the more professional side.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's like just because you're having fun doesn't mean you're not being serious, right? Or you're not
Mhm.
taking things seriously. And the example I always give is like, IBM in its heyday did we had penguins in ads, we had kids in ads, we had like astronauts in ads, and IBM sold some really expensive and serious solutions, right? Nobody
Mhm.
could say that they weren't. So yeah, I think it's a lost opportunity in the
Mhm.
business world to not sort of to take themselves too seriously. And plus,
Or-
just because you put on a suit doesn't mean you've lost your sense of humor.
Yeah, and also it it I think like I said, I do mostly teaching. When the participants feel energized, they're going to remember things better. If you're
Right.
putting them sort of making them sleepy, or then they may not remember as much. So I think there really is an appropriate role for that sort of fun, energetic, interesting side. And you just have to find, I also am very conscious of not being frivolous. And I think
Yeah.
that's the other extreme is
Yes.
you don't want any of your clients to feel like they're paying for something and it's like, what am I paying for here? It has to be substantive, the information or whatever it is, but it can be presented in a way that's engaging. And I think that's where the two sort of meet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm 100% in agreement with you because I found you're absolutely right that even going back to school, the teachers that made the subjects fun, I still remember. The
Hmm.
ones that didn't, I still,
Don't
wake up at night with cold sweats. So trying to understand why. But yeah, no, absolutely. And it doesn't change, right? I mean, we still learn the same way. And if you create an environment where it's an actually fun and like you said, non-frivolous, but fun and engaging, I think you end up with much better you know, engagement and also learning. So I
Yeah,
completely agree with you. And I
yeah,
don't know
and
why more corporations don't do that.
yeah, and well, and I do think it's not that it takes extra work. It takes an awareness
Yes.
of the necessity of both. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So that would be my advice would be aware that both are necessary and then figure out what's the right balance for your business.
And I would love to inject some of that into the federal government. Any federal government, anywhere in the world, not just here.
No, that's right.
Yeah. So now we talked about embracing creativity, but embracing creativity also involves some amount of risk. So can you talk about the biggest risk you've taken as a solopreneur and what you learned from it?
Wow, the biggest risk I would say starting.
Yeah.
I mean that maybe sounds sort of uh like that's at the very beginning, but I had this idea for many years and nobody was really talking about it. And so retiring from the federal government and then going back to school and just saying, okay, I'm going to figure something out here. I just believe there's something here. To me, that was the biggest risk. Creating the LLC and all of that is the mechanism for implementing that risk. But for
Right.
me, it was, plus I had been in the federal government for almost 30 years. You know, it's, that's pretty
Yeah.
structured. Luckily, I'd had my dance company for about 22 years during the same time frame. So I had that sort of idea of that sort of unpredictability. But to suddenly just say, okay, I'm going to see if anyone thinks this is valuable, that was the risk.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a leap of faith. I admire you for taking that. So let me ask you now, if we were to meet 3 years from now, what would success look like for you, both professionally and personally?
Success to me would be if I was able to um, every year work with some federal agencies or nonprofit organizations to help them improve their budget strategic planning process. Um, if I could present consistently a series of workshops to help others who maybe just are interested in this, and almost create, my original idea was that if I could get groups of workshops going, is to create a network, sort of what you're thinking about with the solopreneurs.
Right.
Create, to establish a community of budget and strategic planning individuals who are interested in this creative aspect, tools, so that then they could problem solve together. I'm not, you know, the only person, and there's such a variety of budget processes and strategic planning processes. But if I could bring people together, and if in 3 years I had what I felt like was a healthy community, or the start of one, then I could retire. I would feel like, okay, great. Oh, I did it. They could go and keep on growing and developing it and expanding it. But yeah, I think that would be the best part, is if I could figure out a way of creating a community of like-minded budgeteers.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and it would be infectious and really valuable to society as a whole. And we should definitely exchange notes on building our communities.
Okay.
And also, Janet, I'm not sure I believe you when you say retire, because you could have a fourth act. So I'm not entirely sure I'm buying that argument, but we'll leave it there.
Okay. I retired from my third career to start
Yeah,
my fourth career.
fourth
Yeah,
career. Yeah.
I probably will. My husband keeps saying, so when are you going to stop working? I'm like, I don't know.
So, if you could offer one piece of advice to someone wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you say to them?
Um, at least initially be clear why you're starting it. There is, and I think I've seen it in your comments and others, this tendency to want to be everything to everybody, because you feel like you're losing opportunity, you're losing business opportunity. It's a really hard thing. It's counter to maybe human nature. But being clear on why you're starting your solopreneur, and then being open that it's going to change, but still keeping that clarity, I'd say that is. And given that I am a budget person, I would also say make sure you got all your ducks in a row when it comes to the licenses. Just get that taken care of. Figure out a way that it's manageable for you, because you don't want to have your business harmed because of something that you didn't do, from an administrative or financial standpoint. For me, I focused on building capital. I'm a budget
Yeah.
person. I didn't, I kept socking away money that I earned on my business. Now I feel like I have some flexibility to invest. Now I'm sort of clear on what I want to do. So maybe that would be the other piece of advice, is to think about the financial and administrative side. But that's my background. So,
No, I think that's really valuable advice, though, because you're right. I mean, and some of what you said, just get your housekeeping in order, because those kind of things compound, and they get worse over time if you haven't sort of dotted your I's and crossed your T's. And I love the idea of having some little bit socked away, because again, it gives you the freedom to
Mhm.
experiment, which you're going to need to do on this journey. We talked about evolution a few minutes ago. It is
Mhm.
always evolving. And
Yes.
somebody else I talked to, we said the company she started a year ago was not the company she is 2 years from now, right? And
Mhm.
that's absolutely the way it is. Even I feel like I've evolved in the last, it hasn't even been a year yet, but already I feel like I'm a different company than I was when I started. In terms of my focus has remained, like you said, but my
Mhm.
product is evolving. So I think that's really great advice.
Yeah, and I just, for me, I know myself well enough to know financially, I want to have, I'm not going to feel I have the flexibility until I have some amount that I know it's my businesses and I can invest, right? And so over the years, I've just kept socking away money and not touching it. And so I do have flexibility, which and what if you had a bad couple of months too? You can still draw down from the money you didn't draw down on. So it's just, I'll give everyone a little bit of that budget advice.
No, I think that's really good advice. And you're right, you will have a bad couple of months. I'm not saying it's not that you may, you will
You
have.
will.
It's
Yeah.
part of the journey. Yeah, we all do. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
No, I feel like you've really captured the key things about my business. So thank you for the questions that you asked.
Well, no, I appreciate you being so open and honest about your journey, and you've given people a lot to think about and lots of valuable insights. So, with that, well, let's move to our rapid fire round. Yeah.
This is the part I've been most nervous about. I'll
Oh,
just be honest.
you'll be great. What's a piece of unconventional wisdom about creativity that you live by?
An unconventional piece. Well, the unconventional piece is that creativity can be used in almost anything in your life.
Yeah,
And
true.
that to me, I worked with some seniors, and this was on individual creativity, and I taught them creative thinking. And they're like, oh, what you just taught me, I can use at home when I go home to do
Yeah,
some problem solving. And so to me, it's not, it comes back to that idea that creativity isn't separate from your life. It's integral to it. So
yeah, and I think we need more of it. So, agree. What's one um, if you could give every solopreneur one financial superpower, what would it be?
it would be, it would be, the ability to not spend everything you earn,
Yeah,
to not
put away. Yep,
to not budget every penny that you earn, to figure out a budget that gives you a little bit of flexibility. So I guess that would be the superpower.
that's a good superpower to have on this journey. Budget meeting or dance rehearsal? Which is more challenging to choreograph and why? Yeah.
Both, because they are usually uh, compose meetings and collaborative choreography involves human beings who have very strong opinions
Yeah.
and have their area that they're trying to protect. And so I would probably say budget meetings, because choreographers and dancers, we grow up in a collaborative environment mostly. So there
Yeah,
is some underlying basis, but that's not necessarily true in the business world.
true. What's one budgeting myth you'd love to bust forever?
That budget is bean counting.
Yeah,
I want to get rid of that, because budget is not bean counting. It is the way agencies and organizations accomplish what they want to accomplish.
yeah, no, true, true.
As you can see, I'm very passionate about that one.
Yeah, I can tell. What's the biggest misconception people have about the federal budget process?
That agencies, when they get their money, can do whatever they want with it. That is not true. And Congress can be very specific in the appropriations laws, and there are parameters. I guess the other thing is there is nothing snuck in to an appropriations bill.
Oh,
I
really? Wow.
sometimes hear that, they snuck it in. Now, it may have been something that was added, but the people that added it and the people that voted on it should know what was in it. So that was two.
Yeah, well, it's good to know. And I think it'll be helpful, given where we are today, for people to know that. So, Janet, it's been awesome having you. And I've loved your story and your journey and your courage. So, thank you so much for sharing it with our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed myself. Appreciate it.
That wraps up another episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I would love to hear your thoughts about today's conversation. Let's continue the discussion in the comments below or on LinkedIn at Boost Solo. If you're looking to connect with like-minded solopreneurs and take your business to the next level, join our Boost Solo community. And if you're ready to turn your expertise into a story that sells, book a free strategy session at boostsolo.com. Remember, your story is your most valuable asset. Live solo or die corporate.